difficulties. My fault. Uh, Flory is a very distinguished person in our community of international experts. She is the president and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, the first woman to hold that position. She is a graduate of the Johns Hopkins School of International Affairs, Advanced International Studies, and she holds a BA from Dickinson University. Without further ado, I'm glad to introduce my dear friend, Floyd Liser.
Hello here. I'm sorry to interject. So we are unable to hear you. So what I'm going to do is, which is strange because we were able to hear you with the sound a little bit earlier. So I'm going.
Here it is.
Yep, we can hear you clearly now. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay.
Again.
I'm so sorry. That was my fault. I had muted myself when you asked me to earlier and had failed to unmute myself, as many of these as we do. So once again, I'm Floyd Liser. I'm really pleased to be here. I want to send kudos and congratulations to BPIA and to all those who've been involved in putting this conference together. I know how tough it is in these times of COVID-19 and doing virtual events. And just want to congratulate Sylvia Stanfield and Jean Tungara and all the others who played a major role. And again, you know, it's an honor for me to join luminaries and leaders like Congresswoman Karen Bass, Ambassador Andrew Young, who I had the privilege of meeting and working on Africa issues many years ago, Ambassador Tibor Naj. Again, this is really excellent to be talking about diversity in international affairs. And I thought before I jumped into talking about Corporate Council on Africa, where I have been for 3.5 years, that maybe I would say just a little bit about my 36 years in U.S. government, where I had the privilege to draw on my education and to be able to utilize it to work on trade and development issues. Development is actually what brought me to the issue of trade, because trade is so critical in the economic growth of every country in the world. no country in the world is growing without trade and without investment. And so I had the opportunity while in government, both at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative and then in the Office of the Secretary at the Department of Transportation, to work on trade and economic development issues in Latin America, in the Asia Pacific region, and then ultimately to have the great privilege of working on Africa, and have learned so much from them, and also hopefully have brought to the discussion of Africa's economic development the importance of critical issues of trade. And I just wanted to encourage everyone who is participating in this BPIA conference, who is either interested in international affairs or studying it, or in it and thinking of shifting to new areas of concentration. I just want to encourage you. There are so many things that we, people of color, can do to promote international affairs. And I also want to just give a shout out to all of you who are not necessarily focused on Africa. Africa is not the only area that African Americans can be engaged in and promote. I want to encourage you to look at all the regions of the world. And I know that there are folks on here, including a close friend of my daughter's, who has been interested in studying Japan, has lived there, speaks fluent Japanese. Go ahead, Maya Fisher. Just a shout out to you, young lady. So I just want to say that we can contribute anywhere. And in fact, I'm sometimes insulted if people look at African Americans and assume that the only place that we can bring our intellectual capacity and expertise to is the continent of Africa. But let me just say that for me, I studied it in graduate school. It was my focus and my region of study. I had the privilege of going back to Johns Hopkins SAIS and teaching a class there for a semester, which was just incredible. To be able to interact with young people. I'm not so young anymore, but to interact with young people who were just, coming out of graduate school and going into this important field of international development and affairs, international relations. It's called many things, but I think we all know what we're talking about. There are many opportunities out there, and I encourage you in that. Let me say a little bit about Corporate Council on Africa. And then just a bit about where I think it can make a huge difference in terms of what African Americans can do in Africa, and linking minority-owned, women-owned, diaspora-owned businesses to enterprises in Africa. So Corporate Council on Africa, we are a nonprofit organization, a business association with members that are both U.S. and African companies that are multinationals as well as SMEs. Probably more than 60% of our members are SMEs, but we do have a lot of multinational members, including those from key sectors that drive economic growth, such as health, infrastructure, energy, and trade in general. And so we're really pleased to have those members. And I encourage all of you also to look to perhaps joining us. We have tiers of membership, including for smaller members, and hope that we can get many more to be a part of what we're doing, which is promoting U.S.-Africa trade, investment, and business engagement, commercial relations, which, as I said, drives economic growth and job creation on both the U.S. side as well as the African side. I think that today there are many opportunities, I think, for engaging in greater U.S. minority and diaspora engagement with African SMEs. I think many of you know that a lot of the businesses in Africa are in fact SMEs, and many of them are run by women and youth, and so actually U.S. owned businesses, U.S. businesses and SMEs that are owned by minorities, by women, and by youth are also really good matches for engaging with African businesses. And so we at CCA pride ourselves on promoting that kind of engagement. We think that partnerships on multiple levels are needed and should be developed. CCA works not only to form business and business linkages, but to connect public and private sector leaders with business owners, both U.S. and African business owners. And these connections increase the opportunities for investment, and they have the potential to remove some of the bureaucratic bottlenecks. Sometimes it's tough getting into the trade and commercial business. And so we think that being a platform for bringing together government and private sector, both U.S. and African, multinationals, as well as SMEs, is really critical. And I think an important thing that's happening now, especially since the tragedy of George Floyd, is that you have a lot of American companies that are very interested in promoting racial equality, economic equality here in the United States, and are looking for ways to support minorities here in the U.S. And I think that this comes at an interesting time, because we know that Africans have also been huge supporters of social and political movements here in the U.S., and vice versa. We have supported their movements for political justice there as well, freedoms on the continent, independence. All of that is something that we as African Americans have also supported there. And so the opportunity at this point to basically support a number of American businesses who are interested in linking to their African SME brothers and sisters and potential partners, I think is there. And I wanted to touch just a little bit on some of the ways that I think that that can happen. I believe many of you know that there are a range of U.S. government initiatives. One of the ones that's been promoted by the current administration is called Prosper Africa. It includes, I think, as many as 17 different U.S. government agencies, from the Department of State to the African Development Foundation, USTR, Miles Stomping Ground, the Department of Commerce, USAID, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and led by the Development Finance Corporation, which used to be OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. It also includes important government agencies like the U.S. Export-Import Bank. And I'm mentioning all of these because these are U.S. government agencies that can provide various types of support to SMEs, whether they are U.S. SMEs or whether they are African SMEs working with U.S. companies. These organizations have a number of mechanisms for supporting small businesses and supporting large businesses as well, frankly. And so this is a good time, I think, to look at what are the potential opportunities to invest in and partner with African companies. They could be large ones, they could be smaller ones, but across many, many sectors. Obviously, health is an important one that's there. ICT is another sector which I think supports competitiveness in a range of businesses. And so we at CCA, we have an ICT working group that is jointly led by a big US company, Google, which is a member of CCA, and then a small African company called Flutterwave, which is incredible. I encourage you to go online and look up Flutterwave. They're doing incredible things and growing rapidly. Probably soon we won't be able to call them an SME anymore. But both in the ICT area, in the area of finance, where there are new tools, organizations, U.S. government agencies like the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, has a new blended finance tool that they're using, sort of blending traditional government support for infrastructure with private sector led and private capital, private equity, and doing really good things with that as well. And so, you know, we continue to support that. I'll mention just a few other things and stop. You know, many of you know that the U.S. has the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which provides pretty much duty-free access for almost all of Africa's products from eligible countries. There are currently, I think, 39 of them into the U.S. market. It provides, in fact, better access than even some of our FTA partners, free trade agreement partners. It's something that's been in place for a long time. It's had a number of iterations over the years, but there's still 5 years left. And I believe that the 5 years will be critical. So for those of you who are interested in perhaps being distributors of African products, helping smaller businesses who might not be able to supply to the Walmarts and the Targets of the world yet, let's say yet, but who might be able to supply in smaller quantities, that you as a distributor could work with them on getting them into stores in smaller quantities. So there are a lot of opportunities still in AGOA. And AGOA also provides a platform for increasing U.S. exports to African nations as well. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is that beyond AGOA, because we don't know whether Congress will renew AGOA past September 30th of 2025. So beyond AGOA, I'm pleased that the U.S. government is looking at establishing a free trade agreement with an African nation, Kenya, as a start, and using that as a platform for how they will continue to build on AGOA in strengthening U.S.-Africa trade and investment. And I think that the U.S.-Kenya FTA provides a lot of opportunities for small businesses. And then the other thing that I think needs to be mentioned, which is really important for those of us who are Africa proponents and believe in the power of the African market and the opportunities that are available in Africa, some of the fastest growing in the world, despite the fact that they've been hit hard by COVID-19. First sort of a decline in growth in Africa in more than 2 decades. But I believe that Africa is going to come back and come back strong. And so one of the things that will be important in supporting that is the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will be the largest free trade market in the world. And we have 54 African countries that have signed on. We have now, I believe it's about 28 that have ratified the protocols of the AFCFTA, as it's called. And what it means is that it will make it easier for Africans to trade with each other, but it will also make it easier for Africans to trade with other partners, including American companies as well. And so I urge all of you to also look at the African Continental Free Trade Area as an important opportunity for you if you're interested in business. But to wrap up, I think that in terms of Africa, they have a unique relationship with us. We have a unique relationship with them as people of color. And I think that many of the groups that are here in the United States have strong ties, not just family ties, not just sending remittances back home, but they also invest heavily in their countries, and they partner with people from their own countries where they came from or their families came from. So I just want to say that in terms of opportunities for partnering and engagement, obviously Africa and the nations there and the people there and the entrepreneurs there provide tremendous opportunities for those of us who are Black professionals in international affairs to do some great things. And so I just want to, again, encourage all of you to do that. And I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. It's been a pleasure to share with you. Cal, are you there?
Yes, I'm coming. I'm back on now.
Okay, there we go. I'm going to leave back again. Thank you all.
Okay. I don't know, Alexander, how much time we have. I'm not going to summarize what Floyd just said. The one thing I would emphasize for
Cal, feel free to, you all are the final main stage speakers, so feel free at your discretion. You all can talk as long as you all want until 9 p.m. if you like,
okay.
But you can decide when to wrap.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions. I think that the point is, for those who are watching, if you think about what Floyd says, there are many opportunities and there are many resources available. The U.S. government has a lot of different resources, which Floyd listed. Also, in addition, the Corporate Council on Africa has resources. My question to you, Floyd, is there are young people who wish to get engaged commercially in Africa. Can they come to someone in the Corporate Council for guidance on how to reach out to corporations, perhaps identifying potential partners in Africa? Do you have that kind of resource that you can share with people who are interested in Africa?
Well, we're actually a very small nonprofit ourselves. Our team is only about 8 people here, but we're fortunate to have 3 people also on the ground in Africa. We have a West Africa director in Abuja, Nigeria. We have an East Africa director in Nairobi, Kenya, and we have someone who handles our AU, our African Union relationship, as well as Ethiopia, who's in Addis. But in terms of being supportive, we're always happy if people reach out to us. If we can be helpful, we try to do that. As I said, as a small team, we're often absorbed with trying to service our members, many of which are small companies themselves. But again, we're happy to do what we're able to.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the thing that I worked first as a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa. I was also a commercial banker with the Chase Manhattan Bank. And after working for 22 years at the IMF, I did private consulting. And one thing I noticed in my experience is the managerial skills needed to be developed, both on the African side and here in the US. Very often they had very good ideas, but if a corporation or a company in Africa wanted to get banking finance, for instance, they didn't have the tools to put together a financial statement that was credible for the bank. So I think one thing that I would urge people who are watching this program to do is think about developing technical skills that you can then share on the continent. If you studied, let's say, accounting or finance, go and see if you can partner with someone in Africa to develop a network of resources so you can help the people who produce cocoa beans or animal skins or whatever to present their financial prospects in such a way that they can get the financing so that when they come to the American partners, the American partners can point to their bank and say, look, here's my partner, here's what his balance sheet or her balance sheet looks like, here are their operations, here are their financial plans, and we have developed synthesis for development goals. Also, Floyd, you mentioned the impact of George Floyd. Could you comment a little bit more on that? Because as we watch in the US, certainly if you follow these kinds of things, most of the major corporations now are putting a lot more emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, they are recognizing, as is the State Department and other government agencies, that there have been shortcomings and they need to make an effort to do a better job of reaching out and increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Well, I think one of the things that maybe people may not have seen, but I think many did, was the extent to which Africans were really marching with us and really raised their voices on behalf of racial equity and justice here in the U.S. Following George Floyd's death. And I think that for them, as I was saying earlier, there is a bond to not just the U.S., but to the African people, their brothers and sisters and descendants of Africa who happen to be here in the U.S. We're spread all over the world. The diaspora is everywhere, right? But here in the U.S., there is, I think, a special bond. And I think that, as I was saying earlier, you know, I wrote a piece on behalf of CCA that said that as we are looking at ways to pull in African Americans into the mainstream of the U.S. economy, that this was also a good time to look at bringing in Africans and African economies into the global trade and investment structure. Africa still accounts for only 3% of all world trade, despite their incredible wealth. They attract probably less than 2% of all global foreign direct investment, FDI. And clearly, with the kind of growth that's going on there, with the opportunities that are there, with some of the highest rates of return on investment, highest ROI, you know, if you're looking for returns on investment, low default rates on loans, etc., that Africa also deserves another look by the American corporate community in terms of places that they can invest in and get good returns on their money. I don't think, you know, anyone is asking for, nor are the Africans expecting a handout. But the opportunities there are very ripe for companies to look at. And so I just was raising the fact that because there is this link, that this may be a good time to look at not only supporting U.S. companies, U.S. Citizens who deserve a better break, but also looking at Africans and the our African partners, and for many of us, our brothers and sisters on the continent, as a place where we should be investing and looking at the tremendous opportunities.
That's a good point. I think one thing that I've noticed is that with the new emphasis on diversity in the U.S., in our social environment, one way to reinforce that is if there's a real interest in the African American community in reaching out to Africa, then the major corporations who are putting much more emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion could make this a part of their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. In other words, say either within their organizations, they support people who are looking at doing business with Africa, or maybe supporting, given their financial wealth, people who are outside of their corporations, maybe suppliers of in their supply chains and things like that, they could do business in Africa also. And I would also point out that there are countries, Ethiopia comes to mind, Rwanda comes to mind, Senegal comes to mind, Ghana comes to mind. These are countries that are really exceeding expectations in many ways. If you look at where our competitors, where the Chinese are looking, where some of the other foreign companies countries that are looking to Africa. These are where they're looking because they're making breakthroughs. Ethiopia is impressive. Ghana is impressive also. If you could speak to that a little bit. These are countries that I know, but I know you have a much broader knowledge of the continent than I do, and more firsthand knowledge than my mind. So if you could speak to that also.
Well, I wouldn't say that I necessarily have that. I think I have had exposure to a range of countries in Africa, many of which don't get focused on and looked at. Sometimes they are small economies. I think everyone understands that part of the issue of trading with and investing in Africa is that you have many small economies and small markets, but some of them are quite valuable. So we have hosted people from Sierra Leone, head of state from Sierra Leone. There are a number of small economies, Guinea, that have Rwanda. You mentioned, everybody knows about Rwanda, but there are small economies that are doing quite well on the continent that are not often talked about. Botswana is ranked very high on Wall Street in terms of its doing business environment. Small countries like Mauritius, for example, have done very well in improving their in being at the top of the doing business scores in the World Bank's ranking. And there are others. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but basically what I would say is that it's not just 4 or 5 or 6 countries in Africa that are doing well and where there are great opportunities. I would say that there are such a range of countries across the continent, North Africa, Morocco, Southern Africa, Mozambique, where they had the largest gas find ever. There are many places where U.S. Companies and small businesses on the U.S. side can engage with Africa. So I would just say, look across the whole continent. There's much that is there. Cote d'Ivoire is another country where a lot of opportunity there as well. So again, lots of opportunities across the continent.
Thank you very much. I think I'm glad you answered my question the way you did, because that's a point that I think people often overlook. You were U.S. Trade Representative for Africa. You had 47 countries that you were responsible for. You probably visited all 47. So
Not
most
quite.
people hear about.
I missed a few. I missed some, but I went to as many as I could. I did.
But I think the advantage that you bring is that you've seen a broad range of countries. So you're not the ones that are the cliches that everybody's heard about. You're saying, look at a place like Sierra Leone. Is there something we could do there? Is there a niche market for, maybe they produce something in agriculture that would be very, very valuable as a niche product here in the U.S.? There are a lot of opportunities. I think this is the point that I would emphasize that you made and ran throughout your speech as far as I'm concerned. There are opportunities, there are resources available. People just have to look. If you really want to do business in Africa, you have the support in many U.S. government agencies, large and small. You have a wide range of corporations. The one thing I would say also is that think seriously about speaking another foreign language, because most Americans speak English. Well, all Americans speak English for the vast majority, but you have Francophone Africa, you have Lusophone Africa, and the opportunities in those countries are really very, very vast. So, a country like Cape Verde, for instance, they say more Cape Verdeans in the east coast of the United States than they have Cape Verdeans in Cape Verde right now. But it's a beautiful island country with a lot of potential, and it's just a pleasant place to visit. There are many countries like this. I'm sure Floyd could mention more than I know about. Seychelles, I had the pleasure of visiting when I was with the IMF. It's a real paradise. We're looking at Mauritius. Unfortunately, there was an oil spill there, so that's a tragedy. Hopefully, we can avoid that, because that was tourism was the main driver of their economy, and their pristine beaches and water was a high-end tourist destination. So we hope that they can survive there also.
Right.
We could go on. I don't know if
I saw someone, Cal, who asked a question about finding out about jobs with Prosper Africa, and I just thought I'd mention that. If you go to their website, the Prosper Africa, if you Google it, it has a website, and you'll find out about not only what the initiative is about, but also learn about jobs that are available. They have been hiring people. Prosper Africa has, and we were pleased in several series we hosted over the last few months. We did one that was focused on COVID-19. We had a leaders forum where we were pleased at CCA to host 4 African heads of state over the course of 4 days. We had a session where we also featured the head of Prosper Africa, Tori Whitney. They're doing good things, and I would just suggest that you go to their website and check that out. If you have any trouble finding it, I think the person's name is Sarah Jane Serban. Feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to try to send you the link.
Okay, well, I think that maybe we can wrap up now. I think this was an excellent presentation. I enjoy Africa. I enjoy listening to you, Flory. I think that you have a wealth of knowledge. I hope that the people who are watching have benefited from. I know they've benefited from, but I hope they've enjoyed it. I'm sorry to cut it off, but I think that on behalf of BPIA,
we gotta wrap up now.
I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Cal, for having me, and thanks to BPIA again. Alexandria, thank you for your hard work on the conference, all you've done to make things go well.
Thank you both so much. Great conversation. I was listening the entire time. So I'm going to let you all go, and I'm going to encourage you to explore other areas of the conference now. So I will go ahead and dismiss each of you. And Dr. Tungara, right on time. I was thinking I was going to have to walk the conference and come find you. So feel free as the committee lead to share some final remarks.
Visiting some of the panels, it's really been exciting.
Yes.
And I popped into a couple of exhibitor booths as well. We're going to have to bring some of our guests back to some of your BPI chats and fireside chats.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we have enough to last us the entire year.
A lifetime.
Yeah, no, they're excellent. Oh, yes, the discussions are phenomenal.
And I'd also like to make a quick note, again, thanking each of our sponsors and our exhibitors, those contributions that have helped to make this event, the 2020 Black Professionals in International Affairs, Diversity in International Affairs Virtual Conference and Career Fair, talk about a mouthful, to exist and to help make this financially feasible and accessible for different people, including students and young professionals. So I wanted to make sure that we lifted that up. And Dr. Tungara, as our conference lead, who has been our guiding light on this, I'm going to let you finish with any final thoughts before we close the main stage area.
Well, we just want to make sure that our attendees consider joining BPIA. You see what we can do here, and as a 501c3, all of the funds coming in go right back into the organization to support the programs. And what we haven't been able to do in a while, scholarships. We want to get our young people overseas. So stay tuned for that. We want to make sure that you have the means, once COVID moves up the road, to go and to have the international experiences that help you build those careers, that help you think outside of the box, that help you to see people doing fascinating things in other parts of the world and to get you started. All of us have had those kinds of experiences, and they changed our lives. We want these experiences to change your lives as well. So stay tuned. Thank you for coming. Get into those exhibitor booths. People are looking for you. They want to hear from you, to see you there. Ask your questions in the chats. I think some people have found a way to video people in. All right. So go and enjoy yourselves and enjoy the end of the panels. The panels will close out at 8:55 in Alexandria, and I will be back to wish you well.
So, alrighty, so on that note, I'll go ahead and close. Yes, I'll go ahead and close the main stage now. Feel free to check out sessions, expos. I'm heading over to the networking, so if anyone wants to network with me, meet me there. And we'll see you again at our closing at 8:55. Thank you, everybody.